Today's webinar is entitled Women in STEM, How to Combat Gender Gaps. Our presenter today is Dr. Margaret Bailey. Dr. Bailey is the principal investigator of a $3.5 million grant from the National Science Foundation ADVANCE program for a project intended to increase representation and advancement of women in academic science, technology, engineering, and mathematics at RIT. In addition to her leadership role in Advanced RIT, Dr. Bailey is a professor of mechanical engineering specializing in thermodynamics in the Keith Gleason College of Engineering. She conducts research in advanced thermodynamics and is the co-author of a major textbook in this field. Dr. Bailey serves as Senior Faculty Associate to the Provost for Advance, and she co-chairs the President's Commission on Women. Dr. Bailey also served as the founding executive director from 2003 to 2011 of the nationally recognized Women in Engineering program called We at RIT, which is dedicated to expanding the representation of women engineers and women leaders within the engineering profession. Now, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Margaret Bailey.
Thank you, Lisa. So today we're going to be taking a look at and exploring an advanced grant, which RIT received about 2 years ago, and I'm the principal investigator on that grant. So throughout the talk, we'll take a look at how the grant has been formed, what the outcomes are for the grant, what initiatives we're doing for the grant, and the ultimate goals of this large-scale grant. So I will be talking more about each one of these as time progresses throughout the webinar. And these are examples of the 3 goals that we'll touch upon later in the talk. I thought we'd start off on a light note with a Jeopardy question. So lately at RIT, we're in the middle of a strategic planning process. The board just approved the strategic plan last week, so many people are thinking about the future of RIT. So it seemed like an appropriate category for the Jeopardy question. So the answer to the question would be gathering the best people from diverse backgrounds who work effectively together. And an appropriate question that could generate that answer is, what could make RIT one of the best technological universities in the country? With an answer being, well, gathering the best people from diverse backgrounds who work effectively together. And when we talk about diversity, we're talking broadly around gender, race, ethnicity, hearing status, disciplinary area, etc. So then you might wonder, a university like RIT that's growing, we continue to grow in students and in faculty each year. Certainly for those of you who have been here recently, over the last several years, you've seen that just our physical footprint has also grown in exciting ways. So what is it that would stop RIT from being a place where people from highly diverse backgrounds are working together effectively? And when we explore that, that helps us to craft a self-study analysis and a subsequent strategic plan to help us correct some of these issues, some of these opportunities. So in order to build a strong and inclusive faculty body, we need to improve the way that we do things related to recruiting, retaining, and advancing diverse faculty. So to give you some background on how it is we looked at these areas deeply, how we studied them for RIT, about 6 years ago, a team of faculty received funding from the National Science Foundation through the ADVANCE program of NSF to study RIT and really to study how RIT was doing in regards to our patterns for recruiting, retaining, and advancing specifically women faculty. So the ADVANCE program was created at NSF in the early 2000s with a goal of increasing the percentage of women who are in the STEM workforce, in science, technology, engineering, and math jobs in our country. So NSF, through lots of deliberations and planning, decided to focus on faculty and to focus on increasing the representation of women faculty within these fields with the hope that it would create more role models for women students and result in a more diversified STEM workforce. So As I mentioned, a number of years ago, RIT was able to kind of join the advanced community through a self-study, and I led that study as well as many other faculty in RIT, many of whom continue to be involved in very important ways on the advanced grant, and we studied these things, and we were able to put together results on opportunities where RIT could improve. And we put them together in a strategic plan and submitted it, and we were lucky enough, we were very fortunate to get funding our first time in that attempt, because the advanced grant is highly prestigious, it's very competitive. As Lisa had mentioned, it's $3.5 million, at least 5 years. It's a very large effort, and it's one that's so large that a group of women faculty alone could never do all of these things. It's too big. So the project, it requires highly collaborative efforts, and our team is very collaborative. So it does involve many faculty, and there are several faculty that show up on this list of our collaborative transformational effort team, including myself. There's also key administrators, including people who lead recruitment at RIT. We have the president is a key member of our leadership team. We've got a number of deans represented here and many vice presidents, including the vice president of academic affairs, the senior associate vice president, and our provost, Jeremy Hafner. So they are key members of the leadership team, and they have been since the start. So a project this large has measurable outcomes which track how well RIT is doing during our transformational effort. And those outcomes, they can really be summarized into 3 main bullet points, one being all 3 of them have to do with increasing the representation of women. And this STEM SBS acronym, that's STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math, and then it's also social and behavioral science. So the S in STEM is all-encompassing. So social and behavioral science would include sociologists, psychologists, and et cetera. There's many categories that fit into SBS. But we're looking to increase the representation of these women faculty within our university. And in order to do that, a sub-area is to achieve higher levels of retention of these women faculty with the goal of having equivalent rates with male retention rates. We also are aiming towards increasing the representation of women within our candidate pools. So when we advertise for faculty positions, our goal is that 30% of those applicants would be from women. And finally, we'd like to increase the percentage of women in leadership positions in our academic leadership roles with a goal of 40%. So these are the ways that the National Science Foundation measures how well we're doing, and this is how we look at it as well. Now, these outcomes have many sub-objectives, and I could talk for an hour on how we actually get at meeting each one of these and what our intermediate goals are for each one of these. But I'm going to move on and take a look at now the project goals. So the overall goals of the project, again, there's 3 of these, where these are ultimately what we hope to do as a result of having an advanced grant. And the first one being around refining and strengthening our structures as an institution, and looking at and installing, refining new practices that help to promote the representation and advancement of women faculty. So remember, this is an institutional transformation grant. So the government, the National Science Foundation, is investing in RIT to transform the way we do business in certain ways around faculty, and specifically around women faculty. So that first one gets at strengthening what we do as far as institutional structures. The second project goal gets more into the working environment. So enhancing that working environment, supporting career advancement through various means, including empowerment and inclusion, and other symbolic ways that impact women faculty's professional quality of life. And then the third area is an alignment. So, you know, the first one, we're refining and strengthening structures. We're looking at working environment and how to improve the working environment. And the third one is trying to align all of these things together. So aligning institutional, administrative, and informal systems of power and resources to help to support and sustain this progress as we move on as a university. So I hope that you've gotten the sense that this is a fairly ambitious endeavor, a very large project. That's why it's 5+ years and why it's $3.5 million, because you're really, the project is attempting in a strategic, serious manner to change this institution. And the way that we go about doing this, again, it's highly collaborative, but we have a series of initiatives. We have about 10 or more. I'm going to talk about 10 of them in a slide or two. A challenge on a project this big is, how do you engage people in this huge project? How can you help faculty, for example, understand that in a grant like this, an advanced program, can impact their quality of work life as faculty members? So this year, we're setting out more deliberately to communicate that to faculty. And this series of bullet points that I'm showing you is a way that we've designed to involve or at least interest faculty in what we're doing on the grant. And as we go into college-level presentations and we go through, these are our beginning sort of teaser points, trying to get folks engaged in what we're up to, men and women. So often when we go into a college-level meeting, you know, it's predominantly men because our faculty is predominantly men. We have about 32% women. So often there's many men, and you want to be able to engage them and help them to understand how this project can ultimately help them and impact their work lives. So we ask things like, you know, have you ever thought, is there a process for that at RIT? And that gets to procedural transparency, because you want processes communicated in a way that you don't have to know the right people to get things done. Sometimes that always exists in different organizations, but there's certain processes that's very counterproductive, and it can alienate people in the workplace and so on. So just the simple question of, is there a process for that at RIT, and giving them an example, like how do I handle my grad students while I'm out on disability, for an example. And then we get into more the faculty hiring process, where have you ever had a failed faculty search? Have you ever moved with a spouse or partner even though one of you didn't have a job? Or have you lost a job candidate because of what we call this two-body problem? So usually by that point, while we're talking to this room of 50 to 100 folks, a lot of people are starting to nod their heads that this does sound familiar to them because they have experienced, or they know people who have experienced these things. And then the fourth bullet, have you ever missed out on a professional opportunity due to personal responsibilities? And to that, it's something how many men and women shake their heads. And not only younger, as the assistant professors, but people throughout the room who may have elder care issues, child care, whatever. You can just tell the diversity in the room of people who that resonated with. The next one, have you had a great idea that needs funding? Of course, faculty are all shaking their head at that point. And then bringing it back a little more seriously, have you ever felt like you're the only one? You know, you're the only woman in the room. And I feel like that very often, where I am the only woman in a room because I'm an engineer. I work with mostly men. So often I'm the only one. Are you the only deaf person? Are you the only hearing person? At RIT, we have the privilege of working with so many folks who have different hearing status, and sometimes you may be the only person in the room that has hearing. Are you the only person of color? Are you the only one in the room interested in a certain research area? So those kinds of things, that the dynamics that can result from feeling like you're the only, can help inform some of the programming that an institutional transformation grant would do. And then the final one, have you ever thought you should make more money? That always gets people laughing, and now they're really interested in, you know, how is Advance going to pull off something to help with that regard. But we have found that these bullet points help us it helps resonate interest, and then we will launch, and I'll talk to you about some of the initiatives that we have with the grant. And we've got a couple on this slide where we have a Connect grant program, and that's a mini grant. So that helps to fund creative endeavors by faculty, either individual faculty or groups or even departments, to do activities and initiatives that are in line with the goals of Advance. And if you remember the 3 Advance goals, they are pretty broad. So if there's things that faculty are proposing that are going to strengthen their career advancement, you know, that sounds, it sounds like it aligns with an Advance goal. So in the first round of those grants, which happened last year, we awarded 8 grants. They ranged from $2,000, let's say, to about $10,000 or $12,000. So they were fairly modest in size. It's a small grant, but we funded people to do things everywhere from a sole faculty member working on their research. That was one example of the 8. Most of the 8, though, worked together with other people and conducted exercises and activities that helped to build really the intellectual capital of the whole group. So we had groups that traveled to NSF to meet with program officers. We had other groups who designed and administered workshops on campus for other faculty. A number of these 8 awardees held events, talks. We had a faculty member in College of Liberal Arts who held 3 sessions on issues related to women faculty and got very nice attendance on those. We have another group over intersession that's going to hold a leadership development workshop with an excellent external facilitator. So it was wonderful to see how creative that these 8 teams could be with this small amount of funding, and what 8 different groups could actually do with, you know, again, modest levels. The Connectivity series is a series of workshops and seminars and networking events that we have to help connect women faculty. I should mention some of these are, they're open to men and women, so they're not exclusively women. Most of them are, though. And I have bolded on here one that we're really excited about. In just a couple of weeks, we're hosting a theater group from Michigan, from the University of Michigan. They're called the Michigan Players, and they'll be coming here to depict, a troupe of actors will depict a typical department-level meeting where a faculty hiring decision is being made. And the actors represent women and men at different ranks and different race, and it is a very interactive workshop. So the audience is drawn in, they're working together at analyzing what different people in this department are doing, how they could be more effective, how they might be excluding members of the group, and so on. So that's an example of a connectivity series that we have. We also have some initiatives, several initiatives, where we work very collaboratively with administrative partners, and the Dual Career Hire Initiative is one of those, where we're designing a program to help RIT with becoming a place that is more effective at recruiting faculty members who have trailing partners or spouses who work and need jobs. And we are starting with a focus on faculty, but who knows where that program may go. We have other examples of advanced institutions where it starts with a faculty focus and it grows to include administrative and staff assistance as well. So we're excited about this. Designing a program like that, of course, requires heavy engagement by human resources, faculty recruitment, and the Office of the Provost. So we have a robust team involved in that. We also You know, when we talk about improving the working environment, it means that we have to know how we're doing with the working environment. So this Coach Climate Survey helps us do that. We started this 2 years ago. It was the first time we've ever conducted what's called a Coach Climate Survey, and COACH is an acronym for an organization out of Harvard University that has done climate surveys focused on faculty for at least a decade. And they've done it long enough now that enough universities participate in these surveys every year that when we participated, we got our results back as an institution, and then we got a comparison, how we did compared to 5 schools that we identified as peers, and then compared to the whole cohort of universities that took the COACH survey. So that's a great way for us to understand how we're doing as an institution and then how we compare with other institutions. It was a lengthy survey. We're able to analyze the data based on rank and race, ethnicity, and hearing status, because we added a question on the end of that survey asking about hearing status. So that's the first time COACH has ever done that. RIT is a unique institution to have NTID, so it has been very interesting and enlightening to take a look at that data analysis, and the whole university has been taking a look at this analysis for over a year. We've worked closely with the provost, who then started what he calls the COACH Task Force, which Lynn Wild, who's an associate provost, she directs the COACH Task Force with a member of the advanced team, Maureen Valentine. So together they co-chair the COACH Task Force, and they work with a team of wonderful folks who help with how are we going to disseminate this. Last year we went to each college and disseminated it. This year we're looking at dissemination of the subpopulation data, so by gender and et cetera. And we're gearing up to do the survey again next year in January of 2016. So not in 2015, but the next January we'll launch the survey again, which we're excited to do, to see how we're doing, to track progress on some of the areas that we especially wanted to take a look at. We also are looking at work-life balance issues. So there's people working in different colleges on this. We provide synergy between those groups, and we're motivating policy changes through Academic Senate by writing charges to the Academic Senate, which then need to get approved and then sent down to the appropriate governance body. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to policy development. Now, this is the final slide on initiatives, and we do have a few more than this, but I thought 10 was enough to delve into. And the first one here is a faculty gender equity salary study, where myself and another co-PI, Carol Marchetti, who is a statistician in our School of Mathematics, we are very engaged on this. I co-chair a resource allocation committee with Kit Mayberry, who's the Vice President for Strategic Planning. And Kit and I have assembled this really great group of individuals from across the university, from HR, institutional research, the Office of the Provost. There's a dean representative. There's a few statisticians on the group as well, because when you do an equity salary study, it's all about the data and the modeling and the statistics, how you do a statistical analysis on the data. So we are in the process of, we've written a request for proposal, we've accepted bids. We're very close to a point where we will begin working with an external consultant on this, and we're hopeful by the end of spring to be at the point where we can disseminate the results in a way that we have high quality and the high confidence, I should say, in the quality, the thoroughness of the report, of whatever they find. And hopefully, we'll have very good news to report either way on what's happening with salary. And as I mentioned, the policy development, Maureen Valentine is engaged in that on the grant team. And I should also mention other key members are Sharon Mason and Betsy Dell. They're also co-PIs on the grant team. But Maureen works heavily with policy development in supporting the Faculty Affairs Committee, as do I, which is part of Academic Senate, on supporting them on different policy revisions which support faculty as they progress through their lives. For example, last year, the university celebrated the Academic Senate for passing a new tenure policy which added a great deal more clarity to the procedures around tenure review and the process at RIT, and it also included a provision for an automatic tenure extension in the case that a faculty member, male or female, had a child by birth or adoption. So that was wonderful for the university to achieve that last year, and you know, there were many people very involved in that effort. And finally, unconscious bias education is something that I'm working on with another wonderful group of people from across the university. At RIT, we have a history, a pretty rich history on unconscious bias education, actually. We have a lot to build on in that regard because we've done a lot. So we've been very deliberate with education of search committees over the years, but we're looking at how can we improve that, how can we make it more systematic, and how could we possibly extend it beyond just the hiring process. As faculty members, we do a lot of evaluation of each other. It's part of how we work. So we evaluate each other during key decisions in our careers, like tenure attainment and promotion to full professor, and award selection, when the award has an impact on tenure attainment and promotion. There's even some units that are involved in even the evaluation process. It's more of a peer evaluation. So there's many opportunities at RIT within our faculty body to look at how we go about talking about unconscious bias, because we all have unconscious biases. That's how we operate as as organizations, as people. So it's a normal thing to have these. But to talk more about the implications of some of those during some of these key processes is what we are mostly looking at with that unconscious bias group. Okay? So I've covered and talked to you about a number of things. We talked about the outcomes, that we're shooting for on this grant, and the goals, and the collaborative team that's engaged, and then the series of 10 institutional transformational activity areas that we're looking at. So I thought we'd kind of wrap things up slowly with another Jeopardy question, which should be a lot easier, because it's sort of a summary of what we've talked about. So if we look at today at RIT, not the future, but what we're doing right now, and we think about the answer to a question being a collaborative effort that involves faculty and administration aimed at improving processes for recruiting, retaining, and advancing a diverse faculty. And the effort has measurable outcomes. It's supported by a set of project goals with over 10 areas of transformational action, all of which impact the professional and personal lives of our faculty. And then the question that could lead to that, you're probably all ready to say it, what is NSF ADVANCE RIT? There you go. So that's what it is. That's the answer there. And I also wanted to touch upon some, if any of you are interested in getting involved and doing anything to support this particular effort or efforts that are aligned with this, things like supporting the increase in numbers of alumni, so women graduates from RIT who attain doctoral degrees or any advanced degree, a master's degree. In order to help support that, for you to consider offering a webinar or a networking event to our women students who are here now, undergraduate, master's level students who are thinking about pursuing a doctorate degree. And these women They can, of course, talk to faculty members like myself who has gone in the academic route. It would be very beneficial, and I'm sure that they reach out and try to talk to women who maybe are doing other things with advanced degrees as well. Or for the viewpoint of other faculty members from outside of RIT who may be able to help shape their thoughts and provide insight. So that was just one thought on a collaborative opportunity. Another one that I hope we can get into with our questioning period and answering is sharing of innovative approaches from your workplace that have effectively supported, the career advancement of women in these STEM fields. And then finally, you can make an impact through learning more about what this grant is all about, offering volunteering, mentoring, collaborating, or simply connecting with our team. And I list the website there for you to have. Okay, so I wanted to thank you, and we do have some time for questioning. And
yes, we do. Thank you so much,
sure.
Dr. Bailey, for sharing this with us today. It's such a critical need, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. We do have a number of questions. I also wanted to encourage the people on the phone, please, this is a great time for you to jump in and write any questions that you may have. But I will start with one that we have from Jane. Jane asks, I understand that involving men in leading efforts like this institutional transformation effort is crucial to the effort's success, since this may be seen as a women's focused initiative. Do you agree with this? And if so, what efforts have been made to increase the involvement of men?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. As I mentioned, most of the faculty are men. And most of our administrators are men. So there's no way possible that this could be a women's only sort of initiative. So it's imperative that we have men involved in key roles in the grant. And we've made efforts to do that, and we've been successful at engaging male administrators in this grant at high levels within the university. I had mentioned during our initiatives that we have different groups of phenomenal people involved, and many of them are men. Some are faculty men, some are administrative males. So we continue to work on that. I'd love to be able to report back, say, in a year where we had some men on our core leadership team that were faculty. At this point, we don't, but when the grant went in, we did. We had a wonderful colleague decided to move on to another institution. So we have had men on the leadership team. Right now, we don't, but it's something that we continue to work on, and we would like to broaden the leadership team. But we do, we're able to, because the grant involves so many people, we are able to have engage people of different genders, of different races, of different hearing status. Great observation, Jane.
That actually brings us to another question from Sue that said, do you collaborate with people outside of RIT to help navigate the Advanced RIT initiative?
Yeah, that's another great question, Sue. So we got this grant, and I had mentioned we received a self-study grant back in 2008. That was our sort of our formal doorway into, we could enter into the advanced doorway, so to speak. So we became members of this broader advanced community in 2008 when we started with our self-study. And what that means is we were invited to go to annual conferences in the Washington, D.C. area, and at those conferences, which are 2 or 3 days, there's so much exchange of information from past institutions that have had these grants. So NSF started them in 2001. There's been about 40 institutional transformation grants awarded since that time, and we're one of them. And many of them have been led by faculty. Some have been led by presidents or provosts. Usually the worker bee types, the people doing the work on the ground, are people that attend these meetings. So you have people that have a lot of experience with navigating the barriers or the difficulties with the grant, or how to adequately celebrate the victories or talk about the good things that are part of your community, your university. So we've reaped so much benefit from being part of this community of other institutions. Many of the other advanced schools are further along on, let's say, the research path than we are as an institution. Most are Research 1 institutions or institutions that have had this balanced research portfolio for a longer time than RIT. So it does put us into a group of peer institutions where there's many that we may aspire to different aspects of who they are. There's some that I think aspire to us, too, for who we are as an institution. So we are very, very grateful and have gained a lot by learning from other institutions. So that was a very good question.
We have a two-part question from Renee. She asked, first, how many women faculty members do you currently have at RIT?
And when we look at the tenured and the pre-tenured faculty, which this grant is focused on, we have 235, and that was back in 2013. So when we take a look at, or 245, excuse me, that encompasses about 32% of our faculty. Now that's overall. That's when you look at STEM and you include social and behavioral science, and that includes the others. So there's some that aren't in STEM or SBS. So if you look at all of the faculty that we have 245 women who are tenured and tenure-track, or pre-tenured, I should say, which encompasses 32%. If you look more at just STEM, so like what I'm in engineering. If you simply look at STEM, and for STEM, we've pulled out social and behavioral science, and when you look at just STEM, there's 98, and out of the 98, there's 24 of us are full professors at RIT who are women. So there's 24 people like myself who's a full professor, a woman in STEM. So these numbers are relatively small. But then it goes up from there. There's 41 who are associates and 33 who are assistants. So the fools are typically the lowest number in any one of the ways we cut it for women. So we've got 98 women who are STEM tenure-track faculty. We have 30 who fall into the social and behavioral science category, 3 of whom are full professors. And there's 117 who fall into that other category. So they're not SBS or STEM. So that totals 245.
Okay, great. We have a question from Luz. I apologize if I'm getting that, mispronouncing that. But they said, do you consider adjunct faculty in this discussion? And then how do we increase the percentage of the representation there as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that the grant has been created, this overall program, it hasn't had a specific aim at adjunct. And we call them, adjuncts here, they fall more into, they're not full-time faculty, they're part-time. The way that we involve them often is through invitations to connectivity series. So we do, where it's appropriate, we invite them to come. But it's a great question in that they're not a central focus on the grant. Now, the idea of getting a grant like this means that, as we increase the number of adjuncts that we hire as an institution, ideally the institution's interested in gender breakdown, and race breakdown, and hearing status breakdown of these people. And you hope that the institution will transform in those ways because of different elements. Different things could motivate the university to transform. Hopefully ADVANCE is one of those things that helps to transform the university in those ways. So that's a very good question.
So we also have questions from Sarah that said, what are some examples from industry and corporate settings in areas such as unconscious bias education, succession planning, mentoring, and work-life integration initiatives of work are seen as best practices?
Oh, yes. And there's many. And I know when we were putting this proposal together, I spent a lot of time looking at there's a list of the 10 best places, corporations, industry locations for work-life balance. And then there are other listings of the 10 best for the advancement of women within the workforce. And we looked at those lists because, frankly, industry is further ahead than we are as an enterprise in the academy. For, I'm sure, a variety of reasons, they're further ahead. So we saw creative, I mean, we mostly looked at the best, you know, so there's many other, I'm sure, great examples of things that are working. But when we looked at those lists, we learned a great deal about the practices that happen with succession planning in corporations, the mentoring, how creative mentoring is within different corporations, work-life balance. We learn about that sometimes from our grads we are a technological institution. We have many students who, let's say, go into the computer area, computer science. They're working for some companies that you just hear incredible benefits that these places have to help their employees with just kind of juggling life. And we don't have a lot of those things. We do have, you know, RIT continues to win awards and be recognized as a great place to work. So we do have a great deal happening here, but when you look at those lists of what's happening elsewhere, you do learn about what's working in other places that we don't have yet.
Do you think that it can be translated and work here within an academic setting?
And some of what we wrote into the grant, we benchmarked off of that. Not everything at this point in our history, you know, do I think we'd be able to do this. But if you get on that track, that mindset of thinking about how to help people succeed in their work lives when they may have many challenges, whether it's young children, college-age children, elder, parents, pets, whatever, you know, that our lives just have a lot going on. And we can learn a lot from corporations. And, you know, I hope that we do continue to educate ourselves and others within the institution, within our university, about what's possible, what we've seen happen positively elsewhere.
We have a new question from Fatima. She said, are there any funding opportunities for research for alumni specifically?
Well, that's a great question. I'm not quite sure. Well, if you're interested in doing some research that has to do with our project, you could contact me, and we could explore that more. But that's a very good question. I'd be happy to explore that more offline with you. So very cool.
Okay. And our last question is from Lydia, and she said, how is the academic career path different than the corporate career path? Mm-hmm. And could these differences affect, either positively or negatively, the impact on women's career progression?
You know, I think that the career path, it is different when you look at an academic career compared to a corporate career. Or an industry career. There's many parallels as well. You know, but when you look at the way that academics, just our system, the way it was created with tenure, with heavy peer evaluations at critical points in your career path, like, for example, you get hired, 3 years later you go through mid-tenure review, and that's a review. Your department head, of course, provides valuable input, as does your dean. But the rest of it is peers. The provost will ultimately, and the president as well, so there's this administrative chain that's engaged in that. But a great deal of importance is put on what your peers, what your colleagues, how they view your work, how they view your publications and your impact. So that happens 3 years into having a faculty career, and then another few years you're going up for tenure review. And that decision is a very important decision because if you gain tenure, you're with the institution a long time. So it's scrutinized, and you're scrutinized again by those same people. And it's not so much that you're scrutinized across the conference room table, it's your materials that have to speak to what it is you've done and accomplished. So those kinds of things I don't think that there's analogous examples in other, like in your typical corporate environment where peers have that kind of impact on your career path. It goes on too. When you go to full professor, it happens again where your record is looked at in detail. So when you think about the impact that may have on underrepresented groups in a population, there definitely is the possibility, I'm sure. Unconscious bias, we use it all the time in the evaluation of things and how we live. So that could come into play. Imagine that you have a committee that's predominantly male looking at a record of a woman who's had some children during her tenure path, and maybe there's been interruptions in that path because of that. And how is that discussed? How is that viewed? What implications does it have? Just as an example, whereas in a corporate setting, I don't think that would happen, where it's a group of peers evaluating somebody at that level of detail. So wonderful question. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I think we have answered all of the questions we've received. I'll give you guys another minute if you'd like to submit one more question. Okay, it looks like we are all finished with our Q&A. Any additional questions that you have can be emailed to ritalum@rit.edu or tweeted to @RIT_alumni with the hashtag #MeRITWebinars, and we will direct your questions to Dr. Bailey.